I already apologize in advance if I sound a little bit stuffed up. I have a head cold from the game last night, having that cold front come through. But OU, I don't know if you say takes care of business. It was definitely a tale of two halves with a very, very awesome LED light show in the second half, um, depending on how you looked at it. But OU beat Kent State 33-3, and it's very much a second verse, same as the first. It seems pretty ironic and funny, at least to me, that it always seems like that I have my expectations set at how OU is supposed to play against their opponent, and then it always seems like things can go awry. Maybe one day I will learn. First half, we were up until kind of the last 2 minutes ish of the game, of the first half. OU's offense just could not get anything going, and they were just extremely stagnant. I guess is that vaulted SEC defense that they are just happily embracing already. I hope not just yet. Um, but however, they were able to get things together, and the second half is what all of us are way more accustomed to. And OU puts away the game against Kent State. Again, 33-3. Overall, looking at Kent State, I really don't have a lot to say about Kent State. I don't know if they were better than UTEP was, but they definitely were able to hang around longer. Again, I think it would have been in the same instance that it would have happened with UTEP, that at some point they were going to get overwhelmed, and our skill position guys are better than their skill position guys, especially at do or die time, and just the raw talent would have overwhelmed them on their side as well. The only thing I can say about Kent State is until OU took care of them, their quarterback Colin was just giving us a lot of headaches with his ability to scramble. Something we mentioned earlier that OU really needed to watch out for. And at the end of the day, he was still able to keep plays alive and keep our offense off the field. But even then, they were only able to score 3 points and get on the board first. Diving that's Kent State. We don't really have a lot to talk about Kent State. Let's talk about our Sooners. So overall, again, inconsistent and a work in progress. I cannot stress enough how much this team is still going to be a work in progress. I know I have a lot of flags and works in progress I'm about to mention, but I also realize I'm a little bit harder on this team than other people are, because I have the firm belief that you go out and play, whether it's a 12-0 team or an 0-12 team, the exact same way. You go out there, you take care of business, and you go out there and win the game at this point. Versus, oh, this is just a team you can play vanilla. I think you should play consistently, regardless. I think looking at the offense, let's dive there first. I think the bright spot on the offense was after they got their act together in the second half. Kudos definitely to Marvin Mims. He definitely had himself a night. He had 7 receptions for 163 yards, which is averages about 23.3 yards a reception, and he had 2 touchdowns. Great night for Marvin Mims last night. Besides that, I would say I guess Dylan Gabriel had a solid game. It was nothing spectacular. It was nothing to write home about. It took care of business and it moved on. But that's kind of the highlights at this point of it. I do think there is a lot of work that this team does need to take care of, barring going into Nebraska next week at this point. And it's funny because I mentioned, we don't know. At the end of the day, we still don't know how much are they respecting skill position guys. We don't know how vanilla the playbook actually is, but there is still things that they need to work on. The biggest knock, for example, is on Dylan Gabriel. In my opinion, he just holds on to the ball too long, and he's trying to let the plays develop naturally. And at least right now, through 2 games, he's gotten a sacked a couple times a result of it, and a combination with the O line's inconsistency as well. My thought, you have to learn to throw that ball away if the O line is not going to give you anything to work with when you're slinging it. At least also through the 2 games, in my opinion, and I've only seen it in person. I have not seen it on television to see otherwise. It seems like he really does telegraph his plays. Again, there could be something of seeing it in person versus on TV with it. There's no escaping it. First half play calling was absolutely atrocious. Not to mention that the offense took like sleepwalking a little too seriously. I mentioned how I want us to focus on the run game while having receiving to keep them honest. I also initially said too that it was almost like a role reversal too, like last week, where if you remember last week I mentioned it was like us trying to put the square peg or the square into the circle peg. It seemed like now that they were focusing on the running and it wasn't working, they were just trying to force it and have the square peg go into the triangle hole this time. It seemed like they were going to will their way into doing this, and you just can't do that. Like you got to work with what's working, and it seemed like last night. It seems like their pass rush was not able to hold back our wide receivers, and we should have been slinging it way earlier in the game than versus what we did then. I understand trying to let the run game develop, but there was just no helping that last night, and they should have gone to the passing a little bit earlier. Um, this also could take into account they may have been holding back. They weren't wanting to show the playbook for what it's worth to Nebraska, but something clicked in the second half, at least with it. But I go back to this is where my weakness in the X's and O's are, and beggars can't be choosers. I say I'd have to stick with it. Something I have stuck with though, and it's the hill that I die on. And I know a lot of people heard it from me last year, and you're going to keep hearing it from me. Is I do not think Eric Gray should be the featured back. I think he is not dynamic enough, even with this offense that is catered to him. And maybe it's still the first two games. I just have not been impressed by the first two games of what he has versus Marcus Major. I really do believe Marcus Major should be the starter for it. It's just whenever he receives the ball, a spark just happens and he makes things happen. It just does not happen with Eric Gray. I'm not saying Eric is a bad running back, not in the slightest. He's a very solid back. It's just it seems like this offense just works for Marcus Major more, and there's just no flashes with Eric. Overall, I also think as a fan, me personally, I'm just not a fan of up tempo. It just feels like it's good for 2 minute drills, but for entire play style, I just don't like it as it's just not giving enough time for the offense to really get into a rhythm, to really go down and march down the field with long drives at this point. Um, Other than that, O line's got to find consistency. They really got to work on the third down conversions. I know a lot of people have mentioned it, like they really converted a lot on second down, but they really got to convert on the third downs as well to make drives stay alive. And finally, there was a lot of dropped balls last night. I would say if this goes past beyond next week at this point, that's definitely a problem. They should definitely have them doing some catching drills at this point. For the defense, again, though, the flip side, if the offense is kind of struggling at the moment, the defense just keeps looking better and better. Kudos to them definitely for keeping it just 3 points and under 300 yards for Kent State. Um, Stutzman, Grimes, and Bowman were the studs on defense last night, and again on track for double-digit sacks if Grimes keeps on going the way he is. Um, Another thing that I really liked last night is they seem like they're naturally forcing the turnovers, and they're not making it a key defining feature of their defense like it was under Alex Grinch. This go around, it really seems like they're focused on consistent tackling and getting three and outs with it, and then the turnovers will magically happen as a result. Um, I can't go anything without mentioning some areas of improvement, though. I was really, really upset that we just let Schlee just run around the field way too much. I was getting very frustrated that we did not put a spy on him to shut that down or to load the box up. I don't understand why we didn't load the box up and just dare him to throw it last night. They only threw it 11 times. So I'm just curious of why, what that game plan was going in there. But then again, if I say that, I have to admit I'm also concerned about the secondary. At least in the stadium, it really felt like our guys were getting beat on those deep balls, and they always seem like a step and a half behind. Again, maybe it was just the playbook they marched out with the defensive side of the ball. But I do have concerns going into the rest of the season at this point, and as we almost are wrapping up the first quarter of the season, that the secondary needs some work. Only other things I want to mention is definitely kudos to Sooner Vision and the stadium crew for the LED show. That was really, really, really neat. When the lights came on like that and it happened, we thought the electricity went out, and then it went, oh, we're getting this new show and fireworks display after touchdowns and everything. Like that was really, 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 really neat and fantastic. And honestly, it kept the crowd just engaged. That's probably one of the funnest home crowds I have been a part of in quite some time. It's been a minute, and that kept the place hopping and just electric. Definitely, again, kudos to them for that. Now moving forward, it did seem like it was a little all over the place, and they were just having fun with it because it was ESPN Plus. But I do think they really do need to come up with a system for that because That being said, if I was someone who had epilepsy, I would wish they would have notified us of that before the game so people could have prepared for it. I do think they do need to put warnings at that point for it versus like have everything going. I think they have a very legitimate gripe for that coming out of nowhere. I also know that plenty of people were also complaining about the television broadcast for it, where it looked like it was just flashing on and off. I guess for me, the only thing for that is that's just going to be part of it, and maybe there's other areas. But I will say that they're going to have to come up with a rundown so it doesn't run over into the highlights and the celebrations. It did seem like that was starting to become a thing last night as well. So, but again, that was the first time for it, and at least for the moment it's fun. I don't know how long that's going to be around before it wears its welcome out at this point. We'll just have to see on it. But for the moment, it does keep the crowd engaged. And I do think this is going to give us some favor going into some potential favor of getting some night games. I'm hoping K State now will be a night game, but who knows? Like I mentioned before as well, I want to stress this enough. Just because I have higher standards for this team for it, it is still hard to get a read on this team of how much are they really opening the playbook up? How much is it that they're respecting Kent State's skill position players and just matching them by skill alone? And just how much really is still a work in progress and how much of it still needs to be practiced. Um, I just want to keep that in note for it. I think most of that goes away next week, even against a terrible Nebraska team, but it is still something to keep in mind. I wouldn't hold the same standards as someone who's just learning, say, multiplication versus someone who's seasoned in it and should know better at that point and should know it right off the bat. Um, only other couple things I've noticed. I understand being referee is a hard time, and I know I've harped on this in earlier videos, and I do try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But guys, last night there was some very textbook blatant no calls or hits on it, as well as just that initial non-safety call. Like, guys, that's inexcusable. Like, you have one job, you're doing it poorly. Y'all gotta step your game up for it. Um, Definitely again, shout out to the I know nobody has control of it, but definitely shout out to the weather for having the cold front come through approximately around like the first quarter. That was some of the best weather, especially from that killer heat the week before and that humidity. This was just night and day. Goodness, it was great to just be in the stadium, have it almost like 70 degrees. It was just a beautiful night. Um, I will say now, that being said, there's a lot of apologists out there saying that they were so proud of the student section sticking it through and not leaving into the second quarter. Honestly, I kind of want to tell those people to shove it. I'm going to be honest. They can shove it because it seemed like they didn't occur to them like, oh, it's only a 7-3 game and it's 70 degrees out. Of course, they're going to stick around. There's still another half to play and it's a close game. I'm sorry, you don't get the compliment when you're part of the problem at that point for it. So I'm sorry if you're trying to swerve around of kudos. No, y'all don't get to have the kudos towards the student section or the fans for that. So that was my overall thoughts of the game with it. At this point, the easy games are done and the challenges begin as OU is, as you saw today, OU is now number 6 in the AP poll, and they will be facing up against Nebraska on their first road game up next week in Lincoln at 11 a.m. I don't care what people say. Yes, Nebraska is a terrible team, but we'll go more into that until Wednesday. But that crowd's going to be hostile. They're definitely wanting to win this game. They're going to want to save their season. Um, Other than that, guys, comment, rate, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as when you know when we go live or when I upload a new video. Tonight, Sean and I, aka Oni Kuno, will do a post-game recap of the game as well as a recap of week 2 because everybody get in here because we are definitely going to be piling on Texas A&M and Notre Dame and just laugh at some of the sheer amount of stupidity that is usually reserved for later of the season. Yet here we are, week 2, with already team chaos at this point. So be sure to tune in tonight, September 11th at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Daylight Time. Boomer Sooner, guys, there's only one Oklahoma, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend.